And then the venom, it burned my throat. Choking on words I never wrote. For Toxicology I used to crave, but now I rise from the mess I made. From poison to precision, sharp and clear, cutting through the shadows I once held near. No more drowning in the dark despair. I'm carving out my path with fearless care. I dance with chaos in a lazy storm. A reckless liar kept my spirit warm. But ashes fall, and I've had my fill. Now I forge my edge with steady will. From poison to precision, sharp and clear, cutting through the shadows I once held near. No more drowning in the dark despair. I'm carving out my path with fearless care. Every star's a map, every wound a tale. Poison's gone, but its lessons prevail. I've honed my flaws into something fierce. A sharp version, no lies can pierce. From poison.
From poison to precision. Good afternoon, viewers at home. My name is Adeoti Olatunde Michael. I'm here today on a course which is toxicology. And today we are going to examine the scope, history, and milestones in toxicology. Just like you must have heard in the lyrics, that is from poison to precision. What do we mean by poison? In our earlier and previous lectures, I made mention of what a poison is, what actually differentiates a poison from a remedy. A poison is nothing but in terms of the dosage. The difference between, I told us that water is good, and if water is consumed in excess, it turns to poison. If food is consumed in excess, the food, the nutrient in the food will turn to be poison. And I said that everybody, including our ancestors, they were also toxicologists. And this is exactly what we have been able to examine in our previous video. And today we are going to talk about how broad is the scope of toxicology and what are the ancient landmarks that we can see in toxicology, and who are relevant in the field of toxicology. So don't forget, I want you to follow me as we go on. These are part of the acronyms. If you are going to be a good toxicologist, honestly speaking, you have to know about different acronyms. So, such as LD₅₀, NOAEL, LOAEL, that is lowest observed adverse effect level, ADI, that is acceptable daily intake, TLV, that is threshold limit value, and when you have MSDS, that is material safety data sheet. And you also come across EPA, that is Environmental Protection Agency. And you also come across OSHA, that is Occupational Safety and Health Administration, WHO, that is World Health Organization, FDA, that is Food and Drug Administration, NAFDAC, that is National Agency for Drug and for Food and Drug Administration and Control, SDS, that is Safety Data Sheet, PPE, that is Personal Protective Equipment, and REACH, that is a registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals. GHS, that is Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. CD50, that is toxic dose for 50% of the population. And EC50, that is effective concentration for 50% of test organism. And when you see IC50, that is inhibitory concentration for 50% of test organism. BMD, that is a benchmark dose. Then QSAR, that is quantitative structure activity relationship. At the end of this lecture, This lecture, students should be able to define the scope and various sub-branches of toxicology. Also, objective 2 is to be able to explain historical evolution of toxicology, and students should be able to highlight key scientists and their major contributions. Then they should be able to identify major milestones in the field of toxicology. Then they should be able to know how applicable is toxicology to real life scenarios. What is toxicology? This has been previously defined. However, today again, this is another opportunity for us to also know what toxicology is all about. This is the scientific study of harmful effects of substances on living organisms. And this examine exposure, the toxic effects, movement in the body, and elimination. That means if we are going to practice what toxicology is all about, as a scientist, you should be able to examine the level of exposure the toxic effect is going to have on the organism, as well as the movement in body, as well as how this can be eliminated from our body. So toxicology will also help to detect, prevent, and manage poisoning. Just like I said in the previous videos, that most of 95% of poison took place while we are still at home. So we are living with 95% of what we are living with are poisonous chemicals, and it is only the way we manage it that is going to determine how healthy we are going to be. What are the core areas of toxicology? Number one is descriptive toxicology. This is what involves tests of toxicity in laboratory animals, that is descriptive. Mechanistic toxicology, this explains how toxin cause harm. Then regulatory, these are safety regulatory laws and policy that is being formulated by each country from one place to another. And when we talk about forensic, this solves illegal poisoning cases. So then clinical toxicology, this has to do with treatment of poisoning in hospital. Then the environmental toxicology, this is the aspect that has to do with studies of impact on nature. And there are just four different types of discipline that have come to interrelate together. And this is we have pharmacology, pathology, biochemistry, toxicology. That is telling us that as we go on in toxicology, these four areas are what we will be talking about. And also, just like I said, the modern toxicology also uses modern tools in bioinformatics to be able to practice toxicology. This toxicology also enhances that we work with WHO, FDAI, EPA, NAFDAC. That is, if you are a toxicologist, if you study toxicology, this can be some of the areas or the places where you can be relevant. And toxicology combines science, it combines laws as well as medicine. Now, there can never be anything now that we are seeing today that will not have any history. And that's the reason why we are going straight into the ancient history of toxicology, or the ancient origin of toxicology. Toxicology actually started around 3000 before Christ, and this was when the Egyptian and Chinese were using herbs and poison. That was when they discovered that. And this was actually linked to a man called Hippocrates, which was able to link diet, water, and poison together. Then another person which is of notable contribution, who wrote a medical toxicology test, is nobody but Dioscorides. We are going to see some of these people as we go on. And just like we have it displayed on the screen, that this civilization understood that natural substances could heal or harm depending on the dose and the type of preparation we apply to it. That was the foundational concept of toxicology. That was when the ancients and the Chinese, that was when they believe and they discovered that the difference between what cures and what also uh, and what also caused harm was in terms of their dose and the level of preparation. That is, a poison can either heal, or a substance can either heal or harm. And that was when the ancient China discovered their pharmacopoeia, such as the Benkao Jing, which was compiled around 2,800 years ago, which was able to list some of the hundreds of herbal substances which had some of their preparation which were very toxic, which had toxic properties. And this early pharmacology stroke treatment system was able to lay the foundation but for both traditional Chinese as well as medicine and toxicology. And just like I said earlier about this man Hippocrates, he was able to link diet, water, and poison together because he proposed that the diseases was not caused by supernatural forces, but it was as a result of environmental factor, the diet we consume, and the type of lifestyle that we even live. And that is why the history of toxicology cannot be completed unless we mention or remember what this man actually contributed into the field of toxicology. And in toxicology terms, he was one of the first to suggest that water sources could carry harmful substances. That is, if you are going to take water and that water is going to be very useful for you, it depends on the source. So don't forget that there are different microorganisms that we have from water sources, and he was the first person that actually talked about that. And dietary intake that could also introduce toxic materials into our body. Then whether we are going to consume, whether we are going to eat balanced diet will actually depend on certain external agents, and which we are going to see. And as we have it here, the photograph, we have people that started from right away from Paracelsus to Linda Binabum. So we are going to see that as we go on. The person here, the photograph of this man who lived between 1493 to 1541, his contribution was often regarded as the father of toxicology because he was the one that introduced the concept that the dose makes the poison. I told us in the our earlier video that the difference between the poison and the dosage, I mean, and the what constitutes a toxic substance is in their dosage. And this was the foundation that was laid by the father of toxicology, which was Paracelsus. This is his photograph. And thereafter, we also have a man who lived between 1787 and 1853. That was Matthew Ophila. And he was also regarded as the father of modern toxicology because he was the pioneer of forensic toxicology. He was able to systematically study poison and also measure their effect on human body. So we can see that here. And the next person is Alice Hamilton, who lived between 1869 to 1970. His contribution was remarkable because he was a leading expert in industrial diseases. Hamilton was very, very instrumental in improving workplace safety as well as health standard in the United States as at that time. And she was able to make his own contribution known. The next person we will consider is Rachel Carson, and this woman also lived between 1907 and 1964. His contribution was basically because he was a marine biologist and a conservationist. He was able to write The Silent Spring, a book that was titled The Silent Spring, and she was able to highlight dangers of pesticides, which was able to lead to increased environmental awareness and policy changes. So she advocated for policy changes in the area of environmental protection. And the next person we are going to talk about is Alvin Selikov. And this man lived between 1915 and 1992. The Selikov research was on asbestos, and that is why we still know that up to today, asbestos is very dangerous to health. And he was able to significantly influence occupational health policies and regulation. While the next person is Bruce Ames, who lived in 1928. He was a genetist and a biochemist. He developed what is known as Ames test up to today, which is a widely used assay to detect chemical mutagens. And the next person is Philippe Grange, who was a contributor in focusing on environmental health. Particularly, he was able to study the effect of industrial chemicals on brain, and his work was dated back to 1950. And the next person, toxicologist, that is of notable repute was Linda Binau. And this was because she was a director, former director of National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. She was able to contribute extensively to research on environmental toxin and public health. Okay, so we have mentioned this man before, and we don't actually need to go into detail of what he was able to contribute. So, notable historical poison. So, hemlock, as we have it here, is the plant that was used, that they believe it was the plant taken by this famous man, Socrates. So, hemlock, he used it, that was the plant that actually poisoned Socrates. And the next one we have in the bottle here is arsenic, which is known as the king of poison. So nobody could withstand the poisonous effect of this. And later on, historically, we recognize cyanide as a common, very common in crime. That is what the poison that they were using, that criminals were using in order to be able to eliminate their victims. Okay. The next one, just like I said, Paracelsus, we have actually mentioned the contribution of this man because he was the one that first of all propounded that what makes difference between something that is harmful and something that is healthy was in terms of the dosage. Okay, so the historically key milestone that we can never and we must never forget in the history of toxicology was 1700, where Ramazini actually came up and he was able to understand and put up what is called occupational hazard. Then the next one was in 1800. That was when there was rise of industrial toxicology, and by the 1920, the LD₅₀ was actually introduced. 1962, Rachel Carson introduced what is called the silent spring, and by the year 1970, that was when OSHA and EPA, these regulatory bodies, were created. And by the year 2000, that was when there was a application of computational biology as well as molecular toxicology actually came into being. And we should not forget very, very quickly the contribution of these three scientists, Matthew Ofila, Alice Hamilton, and Rachel Carson, who was the advocate of environmental hazard. So the major key achievement that we can actually make out of this presentation are: number one, the discovery of antidotes, then safe dosage testing and guidelines, toxicity database and risk assessment, use of genetics and artificial intelligence in toxicology. These are the current trend and the modern trend of toxicology. That is when you apply artificial intelligence, and there are some databases that you can actually get some of the substances that are toxic and those ones that are non-toxic. And this one is very applicable in vaccine production and design of vaccine using the artificial intelligence and bioinformatics tool in order to generate this. So when we now see the future we are looking at when artificial intelligence analysis is going to be able to do a lot for us in the area of detecting even when the soil is going to be known as a poison or toxicant. Okay, and in the class now it is expected that you should be talking about what do we mean by lead poisoning, what is carbon monoxide, what are the outside effect of mercury creams. You know that mercury is very very good and it's very very common that will form part of the component of body cream nowadays. But we have discovered that mercury, the outside effect of this is very very hazardous. So these are part of what should now be going on in the discussion. And our recap for today and the takeaway is that toxicological studies are harmful. Toxicology is a science that will study harmful effect of substances. It is very broad and connected to many many fields. Then historically it is very relevant in the field of toxicology, very relevant in health, very relevant in medicine, public health, and law. So, and as you have it on the screen, you see what is called DIY activity in toxicology. It is expected that you divide yourself into various groups that you do it yourself at home, and that is a hands-on learning task for students that is very related to this topic. The first one is the you have to create a toxicology timeline. That is we have to talk about different. You make use of A4 paper, cardboard, markers, internet, and some other. Those that will be in DIY one. Then the DIY two. Those are the one that will make a toxicology acronym tasks. I mean of charts. So most of the acronym that is applicable in toxicology, it is expected that you will do that by the use of cardboard, charts, markers, rulers, and colored pen. And you'll be able to use different colors to be able to create this, and we'll expect you to bring it into the class. Then you are to also do research of the most famous. We have run through the historical milestone in toxicology for you, starting from Paracelsus and also starting from Socrates and Hippocrates. So you are the one that will about famous toxicology and the achievement they have. Uh, that then DIY4, that is a poison case study. That is a task that is going to pick a real life poisoning incident. For example, lead in water, food contamination. So what you will do is you have to summarize the cause, the toxic agent involved, whether it is animate or inanimate agent. You have to talk about the effect and how they were able to manage it. Oh, so this one you are to present a PowerPoint or class discussion on that. Then the DIY5, you are to label household products under normal circumstance. Everything you should just cultivate that habit that anything, any poison that is unlabeled, anything that is poisonous that is unlabeled, you are anybody is prone to accidentally swallow it. And that's the reason why DIY5, that is you have to label all household products by collecting 5 household products, for example bleach, insecticide, medicine. You read their label, identify any toxic warnings or safety symbol that they have there. So you have to list the active ingredient and research their toxic effect. Then the next one is DIY6, that is toxicology word search. You have to create a word search puzzle with at least 12 toxicology related terms, and you have to exchange this with your classmate or your group so that you'll be able to solve this puzzle together. Then the online tools you are going to make use is you are going to make use of online word generators such as Google and some other search engine. So on this, then DIY7, that is you will do what is called safety poster design. You have to create a safety poster design and how to handle toxic substances at home or school, which include PPE, warning signs, emergency action, and disposal tips. So you have to display this in the class, and you are also to submit this uh, at the end of the day. So the self-check, you have to check yourself, what does the dose make poison mean? If you are to explain that, what do we mean by that? You have to also name one ancient and one modern poison, the one that is has been in the ancient time and the one that is now recognized as a poison. Then which branch of toxicology study poison at work? So, and then our next class, we should be able to make mention of toxic agents and their classification. We will classify that, and we'll be able to classify them into biological, chemicals, as well as physical toxin. And in each of these, we should be able to give examples.